In this video, I will describe how I used an English free online corpus as a way to find out how the use of one particular word has expanded over time and how its meaning has changed. So there will also be a short discussion in the end about how I think I could apply what I've learned by doing this when working with high school students learning English as a second language. So, for this task, I chose to examine how the use of the word cell has changed over time. Not only the meaning of the word have changed, or if it merely gained more than one meaning, but also in which type of texts it occurred. I chose this particular word because it has a significant meaning for the students. It could be referring to something they use very often. I believe this will help to pique their interest and therefore they get a chance to learn something about how a word frequently used nowadays has existed and been used for a very long time. So, what did I expect to find? Well, I know for a fact that the original meaning of the word cell hasn't been completely erased from more modern texts, although I think the new meaning of it has been used considerably more frequently than the original one. Therefore, I expected to find a bigger amount of texts focusing on technology and scientific themes, as well as a bigger amount of texts overall from the years around 2000s than from the 1920s. Um, for the method, I chose to use the Time magazine corpus and COCA, or the Corpus of Contemporary American English, because part of my goal was to get an overview over time, and so the time frame ended up being 1920s to the early 2000s. My chosen search word was the word cell inside of brackets, followed by the tag for noun, provided by the part of speech list, to make sure only nouns were included in the result. I also chose to display the results in charts for a clearer overview. Um, the result actually lined up very well with what I had expected to find between the 1920s and the 1960s. The word cell was mainly relating to jail or prison, and also to cell as in the small building blocks of your body. So Coca showed that the word was most frequently used in scientific texts. It was often written after the word he and followed by a comma. During the 1980s and after, the use of the word increased and almost three-doubled between the 1990s and the 2000s. Now, though, it was almost always relating to cell phones, which was invented in 1983, and the word was mostly found in magazines and texts concerning science and technology. It was often written like a cell phone. The use of the word relating to jail or cell has not decreased in later years, but compared to frequent use of it in relation to cell phone, it is hardly noticeable anymore. So I think this is a concept that could be applied to a bigger task for high school students learning English as a second language, and where the students get the chance to choose from several words which has all changed meaning over time. And I have some examples, which is guy, nice, silly, flirt, meet, clue, or awful. Uh, they would have about 6 lessons, 60 minutes each, to complete the task by using the methods I used when examining the word cell and present it either similar to how I did it or by writing a text. This connects to specific goals in the English 5 syllabus, where it says that the students should be able to perform oral and written production and interaction of various kinds, also in more formal settings, where students instruct, narrate, summarize, explain, comment, assess, and give reasons for their opinions, discuss, and argue. They will also get the chance to explore different ways of searching for, selecting, and evaluating texts and spoken language. And to pass, they would have to fulfill certain goals. They should be able to choose and with some certainty use strategies to assimilate and evaluate the content of spoken or written English. And they should also be able to discuss in basic terms some features in different contexts and parts of the world where English is used, and can also make simple comparisons with their own experiences and knowledge. If I'm to go back to my hypothesis, I'll admit that choosing the word cell instead of some of the other alternatives I had might not have been the most fruitful choice, but as I said before, I did because I think it would be one of the words that the students would most likely recognize as something they use often themselves. It also brings up a whole lot of other topics for discussion, which you can connect to the evolving language. You could, for example, discuss what other impacts the development of technology or youth cultures have had on language use. Here is also the fact that they get to use an online source. There is only the corpus on the computer. There is no physical book, no physical word book, but a whole register of texts collected during a very long time. And by using different searching strategies, you can find out very much about only one word. You could also ask whether they have a hard time communicating with their older family members sometimes, or is there something they believe will never change when it comes to language. They should be allowed to reflect and discuss why the word they chose changed, and in some cases why it happened so drastically, and also get the chance to motivate why they chose that particular word. I myself found it really interesting though, because when I looked up some of the original meaning of those words, I learned a whole lot. I had no idea some of them had a different meaning before. My hypothesis was only so accurate because I already had an idea of what the original meaning of the word cell was, just not exactly when it changed and just how much more frequently it was used nowadays. I think it would gain more students' interests if they got to choose some factors of the task themselves. For example, if they got to choose the word or how they wanted to present their findings. It would also be very useful to let students give feedback to each other during and after the discussion, not only their presentation but on their working methods. It's not uncommon to read in task instructions how important feedback is and how students should reflect over their work during the working process with both other students and the teachers. And teachers have very few negative things to say about constructive and corrective feedback. So, yet, Lister, Saito, and Sato claims that students often have a tendency to prefer receiving corrective feedback from teachers more than teachers feel they should provide it. Mackey further claims that it's a well-known fact among researchers that feedback during conversational interactions, such as the discussion of this particular task, helps to develop students' skills in their second language. So this, to me, equals a will to learn, which should always be encouraged. So lastly, to round it all up, I would just like to present the discussion questions I prepared. First, how important is it to consider word meaning when communicating with your student? How important is it for a student to know about the meaning of different words seen from a historic perspective? And has this caused problems for you before, either as a student or a teacher? Thanks for listening.